Hello, dear friend, and welcome to the Lightbearer's Library. Today is the journal entry for Wednesday, September 10th. It's another glorious day here today, and I realized after my first episode yesterday that I did not properly introduce myself. My name is Kate, and I live in beautiful southern Alberta in Canada. So that's where I am. I always love knowing where people are at in the world in terms of when they're on YouTube or they're podcasting. It always kind of bugs me when I don't know where in the world they are. So that's where I am, southern Alberta. It is the place where my ancestors came here as pioneers in the 1880s, and there are lots of bones buried in the ground all around here, and so that gives me deep roots here, which is always good to have deep roots. I think it helps us to belong to a place, and I spent a lot of time on the West Coast, and while that feels like sort of a spiritual home, a soul home for me, and who knows, maybe I'll go live there again someday. For right now, this is where I'm rooted and grounded with my ancestors' bones. So that is where I am. I realized that I didn't say that. So today I also wanted to talk about, yesterday I talked about what is the library, and in the library of the Lightbearer's Library, it's my journals, reflections, and I realized I didn't talk about the Lightbearers part. So today I wanted to kind of explore what is a Lightbearer, well, who is the Lightbearer? In this case, it's me. I'm the Lightbearer in my Lightbearer's Library. However, I would like to encourage all of you watching and listening to also be Lightbearers. So I guess it comes out of, I'll just explain initially, my love of fantasy novels and magic in a non-practicing way. I know there's, lots of people that practice magic, and I'm just talking about sort of enchantment in general, and that feeling of magic and mystery. And so when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time with my face in a book. It was how I escaped from the world. It was how I shut off all the externals that were not necessarily pleasant. So it was very hard to get me to come to the dinner table. It was very hard to go to bed at night because I just would read as much as I could all night. So the first sort of fantasy novel that I ever read was C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. I remember my mom, she'd have to go away for business, and whenever she'd go away, she'd come home with a new novel in the Chronicles of Narnia series, and so it kind of balanced her going away. So I would love to hear from you if you also found yourself with your face in a book as a child, and what those books were. For me, also later, it was the Harry Potter series. I read and reread those so many times, and I still read and reread those and watch the movies over and over again. It's my happy place when I just need to shut off the world and get away from it all. I just put on a little bit of Harry Potter, just little chunks at a time, over and over again. It's kind of my happy place. So, Lightbearers. I was just writing about it in my journal, so I just kind of refer to that as if I'm looking at my journal. But my initial thought was that when we need a light bearer, it's dark out. So there is a sense for me that the world is is in dark times, and I feel the need to light a lamp and be a light bearer, in my own life and for those around me. And I think also it can be an internal darkness that we find within ourselves, and we need to remember to to have the light and bear the light inside of us as well. It's a sign of hope. So we're not left alone in the dark. And it always reminds me of the quote from Dumbledore, and uh, he says, happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one only remembers to turn on the light. So I always think about Dumbledore when I think about light bearing. Um, it's it's a way of finding hope and happiness. Um, so I also feel like when we recognize that it's dark outside or inside, we have a responsibility to light a light for others, and to recognize the situation that we're in, and that to be a resource and a guide for others. So when there's a light bearer, say, I had this image of being in this dark forest, and we're not sure what the way is through the forest, but as long as we've got a light, we can find the way. And it also brought to mind, the scene in The Lord of the Rings, well, in the books as well. Don't I don't actually think I've read all The Lord of the Rings. It's on the list. It I kind of tried when I was younger, but I was too young to actually get the story. I was probably 12 or 13. They were on our bookshelf. I think my mom had them. And um and I tried reading them, and it was too over my head. So I kind of never went back to them. I do believe I read The Hobbit. I did read The Hobbit though. But it reminded me of the time when they're walking through the mines of Moria, and Gandalf has his staff lit, and they're all following him, and so he's being the light bearer for the group, and that also allows the other people in the group who have different skills, who are not necessarily the light bearers, to do what they need to do, to craft things, right? There are lots of people who craft things, who tell stories, um, who protect others, right? We need the protectors. So if there's a light bearer, then the protectors can see farther and can see when trouble is coming. So yeah, um, and when we have that light, there's a courage to go into the darkness, to not avoid the darkness. And I think when there is so much darkness around, when we choose to step up as a light bearer, we are accepting the times for what they are. We're not in denial of the darkness, whether it's outside of us or inside of us. If we're going into the internal depths of our subconscious, or we're dealing with all sorts of things in our life, whatever that might be, that cause us to need to go inside into the darkness, and whether that's in depression or anxiety or loss or grief. I think there's always a need for a light bearer, and sometimes we can't be that light bearer for ourselves, and we need light bearers outside of us to help guide us through our own darkness. So I think there's all these connotations for me of what the light bearer is. And Yeah, and I guess there's just that sense of it evokes magic and mystery and fantasy, which has always been something that I felt is the reason for being. The reason for being here in the world, my reason for being here in the world, is to find the magic, find the mystery, the mundane world, the muggle world, as we read about in Harry Potter, that it always felt like a true reflection of my own sense of reality, that there was a muggle world and I really just don't belong in it. I belong in the magical world. So I'm always trying to find that magic and that mystery within the world. So whether that lies in books or in places, I found a lot of magic feeling in nature when I'm out walking in nature, just being with trees. I often feel this sense of, you know, that there's fairies that live here. There's invisible forces that you can't see, and for the most part, for me, those senses are positive. Um, but I know that there can also be a darker side to that, and so that's why we again need light bearers. So I would love to hear from you how you conceive of this notion of light bearer, and if you've had light bearers in your own life. I know for me, oftentimes there's been wise wise women, wise men in my life who have helped guide me, who or potentially there's most of the time it's books that come to me. um the ones where you go into a bookstore and you just find that book and you start reading it and it opens a whole new world and is the light for you. So books can be our light bearer. Wise men and women can be our light bearers. Sometimes it could be actual like health practitioners, of whether it's a psychologist or a healer, a shaman, a religious figure of a priest or pastor. Um, yeah, it could be a certain practice that we do that provides that light bearing in our life. So it could be going for walks in nature, could be meditation, could be a movement practice of some kind. It could be a group activity. Sometimes introverts, we need to get into groups to get that extroverted energy that kind of brings us alive again. Like I'm thinking of running groups or those group exercises. I've never done those, but the cycling one, what's that called? Spin classes. So I guess I've done yoga classes, and that's kind of a similar. It's a group experience, and that brings a bit of light because you're not alone and you're experiencing something together. So yeah, let me know if there's any stories that come to mind or things how you see the word light bearer. And so I'm hoping that we can be light bearers for one another, that we can be light bearers for those around us, and just make the world a little bit more light, a little bit more magical, a little bit more fantastical. So I think that's it for today. I will sign off. XOX Kate.